This is the Stingray Show, and coming up on this edition, we are about to be joined by a native of Tuscaloosa, Alabama, who played college baseball at Mississippi State from 1987 through 1990. He then became an assistant coach at Missouri before becoming the head coach at Kentucky and then at Mississippi State. And after that, he became the athletic director at Mississippi State and now down at Auburn. John Cohen will join me on this edition of the Stingray Show.
Hi, this is Tim Brando with a reminder. Those of you on Tide 100.9, look out. You're about to feel the buzz of Stingray.
War Eagle, hey, or Hell State, whichever one you want to say. Welcome inside another edition of the Stingray Show, and I am about to be joined by the current athletic director down at Auburn, John Cohen. And going back to his time briefly at Mississippi State as the baseball coach, he took Mississippi State to the postseason in 5 of his 8 seasons there at Mississippi State, and his overall win record was 605 wins. Please help me welcome to the Stingray Show the head athletic director down at Auburn, John Cohen. John, how are things with you down in Auburn?
Great, Stingray. How you doing, brother?
Doing fantastic. So, Coach and AD, I've got to ask you to start off, please explain to us from your perspective how difficult it is to navigate the transfer portal and the NIL right now.
You know, I think anything that's new is difficult and bumpy in the beginning, Stingray, but certainly we have a lot of people here on this campus who work very, very hard to prepare for these moments. Do we have every single answer? No, we don't. But I think we're well on our way to having our student athletes and our staff as prepared as we possibly can. You know, this is to say this is historic and to say that the landscape has changed is really undershooting the mark. There's a lot we still don't know, but a lot of good people have put a lot of time into this, and we need to give it our best effort.
So, John, ultimately, how do you feel like that we can fix the current situation?
Well, I think the idea of what we have with NIL Go and our rev share opportunities on our campuses is really well thought out, and in its most perfect form, I think it can work. But you know, it's like any sporting event, right? If you're a coach, you're looking for every possible advantage you can possibly have. Right. And I think that's a good thing early on in this process, Stingray, because I think a lot of institutions will point out, you know, potential holes, pitfalls in this system. And that's how you get things right. That's why rules are made. That's why policies are in place, because you try and think through all of the holes that are there. And so hopefully we'll get to that point.
So, John, you are a native of Tuscaloosa, Alabama, and you grew up here in Tuscaloosa in the 1960s and 70s. What was Tuscaloosa like back then?
Well, you know, it was so different. It was a much smaller town. And, I had 2 parents who were educators in Tuscaloosa. My mother was a public school teacher, and my father was a law professor at the university. And I just feel like I couldn't have asked for a better childhood. 3 sisters who really cared and took care of me, older sisters, and just an incredible community. And I was fortunate enough to do some things athletically. And when you do in any small town in Alabama, you can have the community rally around you, and fortunate enough to go play for the great Ron Polk at Mississippi State. Stingray, I'll just tell you this. I just feel like I'm the most fortunate person in the world. I just feel like so many things have been given to me, and I need to do a great job of giving back because of all the things that have been given to me, not only as a kid growing up there in Tuscaloosa, but at Mississippi State and everywhere I've been, and now especially at Auburn.
Right. So, Coach, being from Tuscaloosa, what made you choose to play baseball over at Mississippi State?
Well, Alabama really didn't recruit me, which I view this as a really lucky, fortunate thing. Because, I probably, if offered, I probably would have gone to the University of Alabama, but my entire career really took off because I didn't. My entire career took off because I went to Birmingham Southern for 1 year, played really well against Mississippi State, transferred to Mississippi State. And, Ron Polk helped propel my career along with the entire Mississippi State family, Larry Templeton, and so many others. I am absolutely the product of being on so many other people's shoulders, but I got my first job because those people were willing to vouch for me and help me get that start at the University of Missouri. And I know most athletic directors or head coaches in the Southeastern Conference have a very similar story, but gosh, I'm not even sure I deserve everything that I've been given.
So, briefly, talk about some of your fondest memories of playing baseball over at Mississippi State between 1987 and 1990.
Well, I think you can just draw a line in the sand at that time for the schools and the fans who cared about college baseball and the ones who didn't.
Right.
That was when Coach Bertman first got to LSU and he was starting to get it going. You could see it coming down in Baton Rouge. But even outside of that, I remember going, I'm not being critical of Georgia anyway, but Georgia won a national championship. And I remember playing in their ballpark and, there's nobody there. I remember being here at Auburn. There's literally nobody here. I remember playing at Alabama. There's nobody there. Mississippi State was different because the fans demanded excellence. You had a Hall of Fame level coach and a Hall of Fame level assistant coaching staff. You had an administration who knew it was important. And, I just totally privileged to be part of that at that time and play with so many great players, but also great human beings.
Right.
In my time at Mississippi State. And I'll be forever grateful for that.
So, when did you realize that you wanted to get into coaching?
Yeah, I kind of backed into it.
Okay.
So my father really wanted me to go to law school. My mother probably as well. And I just kept avoiding it. So I did what any good father would do. Instead of me going to law school, I forced my daughter to go to law school. She graduated from Wake Forest 3 years ago and now actually works at Ole Miss, which is a longer story than we have. But I was just trying to avoid law school. This opportunity presented itself. A guy named Mike Ruth, who's the scout who actually signed me for the Minnesota Twins, told me about an opening, helped me find this position at Missouri. And once I got there, I had the totally wrong idea about coaching. Just like most young people, you think it's one way, but it's really another. It's about grinding out each day. It's about trying to make young people disciplined, making them better every day, and going out and finding elite talent. It's a very, very difficult lifestyle, especially on young families. But, Nell Cohen really supported me, and we used to raise two great kids. And, it has worked out, but it was a very difficult start. And to be very successful in coaching in the Southeastern Conference, you're going to find coaches who started with nothing, who worked for nothing, and coaches who grinded through it to get where they are. And I think a lot of times young people look at the end product and they say, wow, look at this guy. And they don't realize how many years of really difficult work and no pay and everything else to get where they are. So again, privileged, fortunate, in the right place, the right time.
So, Coach, in 2009, you got the opportunity to become the head coach at Mississippi State. Talk about that opportunity and what drew you back to Starkville from being a head coach there at Kentucky.
Well, I know some people at Mississippi State like this and some people don't, but, I think my wife, Nell Cohen, said it the best. We had a chance to go back and play or be a part of Carnegie Hall,
right?
The Carnegie Hall of college baseball. It's just one of those places that's so special to me for so many different reasons. And just getting that opportunity meant the world to me. Now, when I got there, I was taking over a team, I believe, that was somewhere in the neighborhood of 23 and 33 and had one of the worst, years in Mississippi State baseball history. That's what I inherited. And it was really difficult. I replaced a legend in Ron Polk. And, I mean, like most coaches, a very competitive person. And I probably didn't handle that transition as well as I should have. But I learned a lot. And to be honest with you, I used that transition of going from Kentucky to Mississippi State, taking over for a legend. I use a lot of that. I have a lot of vision from that helps me to this day as an athletic director here at Auburn.
So, Coach, there is one game in particular that I want to talk with you about. In 2016, your final season at Mississippi State, you guys played Oklahoma in an early season tournament out in Los Angeles, and you guys tied 5-5. Coach, how did that happen? Because you never hear of a tie in baseball.
Well, it happens when you fly, Delta, and you have to make your flights so that the kids can be in class the next day, and you put time limits on those things. But that was a thrill for us. We played at UCLA, we played at USC, and we played Oklahoma in Dodger Stadium. And I'll tell you, Stingray, learned a valuable lesson there too. We spent a lot of resources, a lot of time going out on the West Coast, and it's these things happen. But golly, I think USC ended up having an RPI in the 100s. UCLA ended up having not so good RPI just that year. And what an incredible programs both those are. I'm not taking any shot at either one of them. And Oklahoma didn't have the best of years either. So I joke and I say when we made that trip, it was a great experience for the kids. And I'm not taking anything away from that. But we could have stayed at home in Starkville and played, some pretty good regional talent and got much better RPI for a lot less cost. But it was fun. Our kids had a good experience, and in the long run, that matters.
So, Coach, to finish this up, I do want to ask you, what is the transition like for you of going from head coach to the leader of the athletic program as athletic director?
Stingray, I got the opportunity to do this when I was 50 years old, and I don't think I would have been ready at a younger age. Many can make that transition. I don't think I would have been ready before I had the career that I had in baseball. When you're managing 11.7 scholarships in baseball, when you're managing the draft on the front end and back end, when you're trying to manage all of those things, I think it's tremendous preparation for what we do here. And in fact, the recruitment and re-recruitment of student athletes, as you had to do for baseball forever, is now really what coaches in all sports have to do. Basketball, football, you name it, because of the open transfer portal. So I think there's some really valuable lessons I learned in the baseball world, and having been a coach in the best league in the entire country, the Southeastern Conference. I think it really was great preparation to do what I am doing now. I feel a connection to the coaching world. I feel a connection to the administrative world. And I've had great mentors there also, Stingray. Guys like Scott Strickland, and I know you had Greg Byrne on the show. Greg actually hired me at Mississippi State. Guys like Mitch Barnhart, who's the godfather, and Joe Castiglione, who just announced his retirement. He was our athletic director at Missouri. I've just been always surrounded by greatness. And if I could give any advice to any young person out there, instead of worrying about making money early in your career, worry about being surrounded by greatness and try and learn. And I think that's a great lesson to be learned early in any career.
So I know that you were on a time crunch. Thank you for taking 15 minutes out of your schedule to join me. And I would love for you to come back and join me again, because I have multiple questions for you about your time at Mississippi State and there at Auburn. But the floor is all yours for any final words that you would like to say.
No, Stingray, I appreciate you having me on the show. And I followed you in your career, and man, I know you've worked really, really hard to get out into the stratosphere of what you do in the media. So congratulations to you. And yeah, War Eagle.
Yes, sir, War Eagle. And I will definitely reach back out to have you on, okay?
Yes, sir.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Stingray.
All right. So, guys, that is going to wrap up my interview there with John Cohen. Really do want to thank him for taking time out of his schedule to join me for this very short interview. He had a staff meeting coming up right after this interview, so we were only given 15 minutes to have with AD and coach. But I did want to ask him a couple of more questions about his transition of going from athletic director to the head coach to athletic director, and especially ask him about the improvements and renovation that Mississippi State did on Dudy Noble Field. That is the baseball program and the baseball facility over there in Starkville, because he was the main one that got the renovation done for what is the new and updated Dudy Noble over there in Starkville. And to finish up this little bit before we move on, I did want to also mention that John Cohen's 2013 Mississippi State baseball team over in Starkville ended up the College World Series runners-up to the UCLA Bruins. So he was a very good coach over there at Mississippi State. And like I said, he won 294 games in Starkville and took Mississippi State to the postseason in 5 of his 8 seasons over there in Starkville. And now he is down at Auburn, doing great things at Auburn as the athletic director, and down there at the stadium, Jordan Hare, they are doing a renovation down there with a new video board that they just implemented, and that will open the season when they take on Ball State in week number 2 on Saturday, September the 6th. So wonderful things ongoing down at Auburn with John Cohen, and thank him for joining me this evening